Hi, Carissa. Thanks ever so much for joining me today and saying that you'll take part in these climate conversations. I wondered if you might just introduce yourself and your various hats and the work you do.
Great. Yeah, it's lovely to be part of your project. So my name is Carissa Honeywell, and one of the things I do, one of the projects I'm involved in is I'm a director at Foodhall, which is a social eating project that I can tell you a bit more about. I'm also a lecturer in politics at Sheffield Hallam, and I specialise in political ideas and anarchist political thought, and kind of anarchist solutions to social and political problems.
Thank you. So my first question is to ask you what work you're doing around climate change or the climate crisis.
So the work I'm doing related to climate change and climate crises and all the kind of interlocking social crises in that whole intersecting set of problems we face at the moment is the work of Foodhall in providing or trying to facilitate community through tackling food insecurity, food waste, and the kind of intersecting problems of social inequality and social isolation by sourcing waste food, bringing everyone together to prepare and share that food. So the main work of Foodhall is to serve communal meals on a kind of contribute what you can basis so that everyone can access food. The food is vegetarian and often vegan, which is a kind of core emphasis of the project. And the idea is that everyone can access food, sustainable food, company and community in along a model of mutual aid. So there's not a distinction between people meeting needs for food and meeting needs for relationship and meeting needs for community and all sorts of other needs that emerge in a social context.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you want to add anything else?
No, I can wait till the next question.
Okay, great. So if you could tell me a bit more about how you do that work.
So I think the main tools and kind of conceptual frameworks that shape and facilitate the work of Foodhall, I think is that on a conceptual level a kind of shared understanding of how these various crises that we face are interlinked. So how what we eat and how we eat it and how we think about eating is connected to how we think about shared resources and how we think about relationship as a resource. So the idea is that when people are brought together through food, we can build platforms for community and other projects through kind of communities of committed volunteers and working groups. So there's some distinctive sort of Foodhall projects are things like community garden, food growing projects. There's a big emphasis on bike classes, bike repair classes, and the kind of ethos of sustainable travel. And that was a big emphasis in the food delivery project that ran over pandemic. So Foodhall became very involved in delivering food parcels across the city, and in as far as possible, that was done through the efforts of volunteers on bicycles. And So that's a big part of the ethos of Foodhall. There's also cooking workshops, and there's a fermenting and foraging group that is thriving at Foodhall, and things like community journals and art projects and so on, as well as the social eating cafe that at the moment runs on a Friday. And the idea is to be able to source waste food or sustainable food, that to kind of fuel all of those projects around community, through this kind of idea that everyone has a universal right to eat good food, that isn't based on the exploitation of other beings. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. And my final question is, and I'm aware this is quite a big open question, so I think just maybe some thoughts on things that you're engaging with at the moment, but what would you consider to be the biggest issue related to climate change in Sheffield right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sheffield's quite a special place in terms of communities of people, and the kind of projects that happen, but in many ways it's still quite a polarized place of different communities, and I think that polarization and social isolation can work against, you know, the building of the kind of communities of value that that we'll need to survive, our kind of communities of survival and communities of solidarity. So that there's a lot that's positive in Sheffield in terms of community, but also a lot of separation between communities. I mean, Sheffield's quite well known for being quite economically polarised on different sides of the city. So I think that's quite important in Sheffield. I think there are some really important, you know, what I've seen working at Foodhall is Sheffield does have some particular challenges around agencies not being very joined up with each other. I think this is a really quite an important challenge in Sheffield. I would love to see some innovation around. It's how to connect up all these various organisations that are doing great work, but maybe, you know, are limited in the scope and ambition, the kind of utopian dreaming that they can go for by not drawing on the strengths of each other. And this is, you know, I'd really love for some fresh thinking around that Foodhall can draw on as well. So that's quite important, that just building connectedness, building kind of mutual trust and support between organisations that are packed with these enthusiastic and energetic volunteers. So many people wanting to do good work that are a bit too separated from each other, and maybe replicating certain services. There just might be some really exciting things that can happen in collaboration, and I think there's a lot of potential for that. So there's that, and then I think we're facing, not just in Sheffield, but such a crisis of isolation, impoverishment, and mental health. I think you know, the pandemic really highlighted a lot of things that we should keep at the forefront of our awareness now that you know, they've been so highlighted. We need to be innovative about things like welfare and health and community, and meeting our needs in an era of accelerating privatization and the kind of neoliberal reduction of shared resources. You know, we can frame this as thinking about building a commons through our relationships in the face of structures and institutions that are limiting those kind of services. It's a bit I hope that's clear. It's kind of, I think that the building of relationships is the way forward for meeting so many needs and agendas.
Great, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or shall we close here?
No, I think that's everything. I think I rambled away quite happily.
Oh, cool. No, that's wonderful. Thanks.
I'd love to hear, and I'd love to hear any thoughts or input into any of those